Today I'm going to quickly talk about the ending of Black Mirror Season 5 Episode 2 Smithereens, while adding some clarity to the overall story and pointing out some things you guys may have missed. But before I begin, there will definitely be spoilers ahead for this episode, as well as spoilers for Shut Up and Dance, Nosedive, the National Anthem, Black Museum, and Bandersnatch. So with that said, here we go. A man named Chris works as a rideshare driver and picks up Jaden in front of the social media company Smithereen. Chris takes him hostage, thinking that Jaden had a higher up position at the company because of the way he presented himself. After finding out Jaden was just an intern, Chris still goes through with the plan of taking an employee from Smithereen hostage and using them to get a phone call with the CEO of Smithereen, Billy Bauer, a name that has made an appearance in the end of the Black Mirror standalone film Bandersnatch. When Pearl Rittman was being interviewed, there was a headline at the bottom scrolling by saying, "Senate Committee grills Smithereen CEO Billy Bauer over Russian bots." Smithereens was written by the show's creator Charlie Brooker and directed by James Hawes, who also directed Black Mirror Season 3 Episode 6 Hayden in the Nation, which is fitting because like Hayden in the Nation, Smithereens is more modern and realistic. Except for this episode in particular, Charlie Brooker wanted no future technology, like the previous episodes of the National Anthem and Shut Up and Dance. And quick side note, Smithereens could be happening in the same universe as the other episodes like Shut Up and Dance, and especially the National Anthem, as there's a headline for Prime Minister Cowell meeting with EU negotiators displayed on the wall at the Smithereen headquarters. Smithereens could also be happening in the same universe as Playtest apparently, because right below the headline with Cowell, there is another post from Saito Gameu. Also, when Chris was using the Hitcher app, you can see that he was right next to Saito Gameu Arcades, which is right down the street from the Bandersnatch Theater, and that sounds like a pretty rad area to be in. And that's pretty much, wait a second, oh my. I think we found the motherlode of Easter egg hashtags, everybody. And I know we're supposed to be talking about things like the subtext story and how real world problems relate to this episode, but dang it, we're gonna take a second to dissect the trending hashtags on the wall at Smithereen. We see two hashtags referencing the National Anthem with Oink Oink Cowl and Snout Rage, adding one more to the pig pun counter. Sea of Tranquility reboot is referring to the show Sea of Tranquility, mentioned in the National Anthem as the special effects artist worked on the show, and is also brought up in Nosedive when Lacey hitches a ride with a bunch of trankheads. From what I can make out, Saito Gameu's post reads, 6-hour warning, can you wait? This must be referring to the hashtag Saito Gameu announcement, and right below that is hashtag SaitoX Netflix, implying that the 6-hour warning is for the announcement for Saito's collaboration with Netflix. Whatever that may be, I'm just hoping we get a Harlech Shadow version of Bandersnatch. The hashtag St. Juniper Strike and hashtag Tucker must be referring to TCKR systems that we've seen in episodes like San Junipero and Black Museum. In Black Museum, we see the TCKR sign above the doorway when Rollo walks Dawson up to the 10th floor of St. Juniper's. So the hashtag could mean that employees were probably fed up with the unethical experimentation happening at their hospital, causing them to go on strike. But we're not here just to talk about hashtags, are we? Of course not. We're here to talk about Easter eggs. Victoria Scallane's name comes up when Penelope and friends are checking if Chris ever expressed hostile sentiments towards Smithereen as an entity. They brought up a language analysis of the words Chris used most on their site. Right at the bottom is the name Victoria Scallane, as well as our homeboy Prime Minister Cowell and Space Fleet from USS Callister. One of the news vans is from UKN, which is the reoccurring news station of Black Mirror since the pilot The National Anthem. And let's go back to the map on Hitcher. The street Chris was waiting on to pick up Smithereen employees was Scallane Street, London. Also, Fence's Pizza from Crocodile and USS Callister makes an appearance on the map. There's also a Fence's Pizza box at Chris's mom's place. There's Stripe's Cocktail Bar, named after Stripe from Men Against Fire, National Allied Bank, the same bank that Kenny Robs in Shut Up and Dance. Cooper Redfield from Playtest also has a theater named after him. Vanessa Dahl from Hated in the Nation has a shoe store named after her, and the MTL HD stands for Metalhead. By the way, before the Smithereen employee calls Penelope Wu, she quickly scrolls through her contact list, which has the name of pretty much every single character in Black Mirror. Okay, I'm done. I swear. Moving on. Chris ended up in a car in the middle of a field holding an intern hostage because 3 years prior he was driving his fiancée Tamsin home and got distracted by a Smithereen notification, causing an accident that killed Tamsin and the other driver he collided with. Chris got away with it because his record was clean and the other driver was intoxicated. Chris needed to tell someone the truth, and figured he could deliver his message to the head of the company that programmed him to have an overwhelming need to view their notifications. Haley wanted a reason for why her daughter took her own life. She tries to access her daughter's Persona account to view her inbox and get answers, and when talking in the support group, she claims, "It's never gonna stop, this needing to know. It's never gonna stop." And in this moment, we focus on Chris's face, as this line of dialogue is very much reflective of how we are glued to our smartphones. How it's hard for us not to open the next email, text, or any notification that appears on our devices. And how once we open it, it really doesn't matter. And then we kind of just want to move on to the next notification and find out what that's about. The 1967 song Can't Take My Eyes Off of You, originally performed by Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons, plays in key moments throughout the episode. The lyrics, "I can't take my eyes off of you, you'd be like heaven to touch, I want to hold you so much, at long last love has arrived," can all be interpreted as our need to hold our phones in our hands and see our text messages, notifications, or whatever else we're getting sent on our smartphones with the relief that we finally got a new dopamine hit. Also, with the context of the episode, the lyrics "I need you baby to warm the lonely nights" are no doubt implicative of how we are glued to our phones when we're in bed right before we go to sleep and right when we wake up. Chris even mentions that he did this, saying, "I was the whole cliche. You know, first thing I saw in the morning, last thing I saw at night." I think it's important to get some real-world tech leaders in here when analyzing this episode. Former Facebook executive Chamath Palihapitiya, who left his position at Facebook in 2011, now claims he feels tremendous guilt for how they weren't thinking of long-term negative consequences when developing the platform. In a 2017 interview at Stanford, Chamath claimed, "The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we've created are destroying how society works. No civil discourse, no cooperation, misinformation, mistruth, and that's not an American problem. This is not about Russian ads, this is a global problem." And in Smithereens, we do see that this is a global problem. We focus on how Billy's company affected the life of Chris while they were both living in two different countries with an entire ocean in between them. I mentioned in my analysis on Nosedive how Lacey's world was one big manifestation of the social media we have nowadays. Her story helps us see that when using these devices, the goal of being content is impossible, and that there is no correlation between using social media and long-term happiness, since most popular social media sites are designed like gambling machines. Sites like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., are now built to always keep you wanting the next heart, like, upvote, or any kind of notification. One of my favorite moments in Nosedive is when Lacey's driving to the wedding and she gets off the phone with Naomi, and she's desperately waiting for Naomi to give her a 5-star rating, mirroring how we wait for the likes and validation on the posts we make. Kind of like how in this episode there's a man's life at stake, and the kids observing the hostage situation only care that their timeline is blowing up. In the same 2017 interview with Chamath, he also claimed, "We get rewarded in these short-term signals, hearts, likes, thumbs up, and we conflate that with value and we conflate it with truth. And instead what it really is fake brittle popularity that's short-term, and that leaves you even more, and admit it, vacant and empty before you did it, because it forces you into this vicious cycle where you're like, what's the next thing I need to do now? Because I need it back." I definitely checked my phone hundreds of times while writing this analysis and several hundred more editing it, and I felt that same empty feeling every time. In Nosedive, we see how artificial and plastic every conversation in their world is, representing how fake people are when talking to each other through social media platforms, and that way of communicating bleeds into our real-life interactions. Chris's character, being someone who broke off from that world, had a similar change to what Lacey went through, as he just wants to have an honest and real conversation and can tell when someone is being fake and disingenuous. That's why he completely figured out the negotiator, and why he called out Billy immediately after Billy started reading out loud the advice his company was sending him, causing Billy and Chris to have one of the only genuine conversations in this episode. This is definitely the longest and most effective PSA for texting and driving prevention that I think I've ever seen. We observe Chris, a man with a perfectly clean record. Even on his Smithereen profile account, it says that he has no warnings given to him, and he hasn't been reported or blocked by anyone, showing us that any human being, good or bad, can fall victim to texting and driving. The other driver was drunk, so Chris got away with it, even though he was also a distracted driver, proving to us that texting and driving can be just as bad as drunk driving. All it took was something as innocent as a dog photo to get distracted and kill two people. I personally think that that's a very powerful and important message. Charlie Brooker wrote it so that the big tech companies had more information on an individual than any law enforcement, which nowadays it's a pretty realistic scenario because it's mostly true, and somewhat terrifying. The COO Penelope Wu and her team at Smithereen were one step ahead ahead of the police, as they could instantaneously access Chris's history and find out things like Chris having a fiance who died in a car accident. Smithereen was also given access to other apps like Hitcher to see that Chris was waiting in front of the Smithereen building for 2 weeks. I love the titles at the bottom because it reminds us that Penelope and her team are better at background checking Chris and tapping into Chris's phone than the police, yet they are operating on a different continent. By the way, did anyone else appreciate that when Chris was talking to Penelope, the voice-to-text software they were using turned to ducking? And speaking of how much power the company has, I think one of the most Black Mirror-esque aspects of this episode is somewhat easy to overlook, and that is the fact that Billy Bauer appears as a Jesus Christ type of figure. He has long, uncut hair with a beard, as well as being dressed in sandals and a white robe, while meditating on a highly elevated spot in the middle of the desert. In the car, Chris keeps repeating, "This is my last day," knowing that he is going to die, but wanting to talk to Billy Bauer before that happens. Almost like a sinner making one last prayer or confession to God. The technology Billy has at his disposal can listen in on anyone's conversation, find out who they are as a human being, and can contact anyone on Earth who uses his app. Billy even claims, "Really the only good thing about my position is every once in a while I get to invoke God mode." With so many people using these platforms, the modern day tech leaders now possess godlike powers. Something I liked about this episode is how it doesn't just hold Chris solely responsible for what happened. Instead, it places blame on the tech companies as well, primarily the CEOs and the leaders of the tech world. Billy Bauer was not meant to resemble any specific CEO, and Brooker wanted to stay away from doing a lot of research on the CEOs of these social media companies, even though Billy shares a lot of similarities with a CEO like Mark Zuckerberg, as Billy claimed he owned Smithereens since 2008, which was the same year Facebook really took off in terms of its popularity and the death of MySpace began. But Brooker has claimed that he took inspiration from the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey. When Dorsey announced that starting the night of his birthday, he went on a 10-day silent retreat to practice Vipassana meditation in Pinoluin, Myanmar. Hopefully I didn't butcher the pronunciation of that. Either way, we see that Billy Bauer goes on his own 10-day silent retreat as well. Brooker has always wanted to stay away from creating a cartoon villain, so he wanted to make Billy more human and relatable. As Brooker claimed, Billy's sort of an enlightened tech bro. He's not a villain, he's conflicted, and we see that he's a bit lost too. And we definitely see that. In his conversation with Chris, Billy is the definition of conflicted. When Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey was tweeting about his 10-day retreat, he did say it was Vipassana meditation, which is not a relaxing form of meditation, but instead more of a way to better understand your mind and body. I think Dorsey describes it really well in one of his tweets, saying, "Vipassana is a technique and practice to know thyself, understanding the inner nature as a way to understand everything. It was rediscovered by Gautama the Buddha 2,500 years ago through rigorous scientific self-experimentation to answer the question, how do I stop suffering?" Before he was interrupted by one of his employees, Billy was practicing his own meditation. The goal for Billy was probably similar to what Jack Dorsey was trying to accomplish. Billy is always taking retreats because he hates what his company has become, as they try to maximize engagement by getting users addicted to their application like a gambling machine at a casino while extracting private information from their users as a hobby. Like Dorsey, Billy was in isolation to do his own soul searching and betterment of oneself, so it was a perfect scenario for Chris to contact him during this time period. Overall, Billy seemed like he actually was a decent human being who genuinely cared about what was happening. The other higher-ups at the company, including Penelope Wu, didn't want to bother him, not because he was evil or intimidating, but because he has final say as their superior. And we see that Billy is more of a wild card, so whatever decision he makes could hurt their profits. We see how people in charge of these tech companies benefit from this addiction, as the first girl to get in Chris's car mentions how she would love to work at Smithereens, saying the facilities they've got in there. They've got their own spa. It's madness. And from his profits, Billy can afford the luxury of escaping the world he polluted. Yet we see your average everyday civilian become a casualty from this intentionally addictive product. Now let's talk about the one question everyone is asking, which is, in the end, what happened to Chris and Jaden? Because everyone's reactions were more accepting of what happened, it's safe to say that nothing happened to Jaden and the cops definitely killed Chris. But after the shot was fired, it didn't matter what happened to Chris, it mattered what happened to you. The sniper takes the shot, but we never see where the bullet landed. We are denied the visual confirmation of whether or not Chris was killed by the sniper, just like we are denied the answer as to why Haley Haley's daughter killed herself, we are left with this very ambiguous ending. The gunshot going off was practically the sound of a notification because immediately after the credits roll, and we quickly turn to our phones to check our favorite social media sites like Twitter or Reddit in search of some explanation. Because like Haley said, this needing to know, it's never gonna stop, and that's probably why you're watching this video in the first place. We're left with the same need you have when you wait for the next update or dopamine hit on your phone. Through the ending credits, we cut to one individual after another as they check their smartphones, with one having the same notification sound effect as Hector from Shut Up and Dance, but they all view the notification and read whatever article or news site it brought them to, and then they simply move on with their lives, pointing out how disposable information has become. The outcome of a man's life was reduced to a notification on a phone, that people are programmed to find out what the notification was about, get confirmation, read the simplified text, and immediately move on while waiting for the next thing. I could not even have a moment to let the ending message of this episode sink in because Netflix is trying to keep up their engagement, so 5 seconds after this episode cuts to the actual credits, it's already playing the next episode of Black Mirror. How is that for being meta? Chris's story really has no impact on anyone. Everyone is caught in this cycle as they learn nothing from Chris's story and continue with their daily routines. And guess what? People are still texting and driving. In this Black Mirror episode, we're given the year 2018. It appears on the screen for a reason. This is not an issue for the future. This is how technology is affecting us right now. When talking about how they would give users little dopamine hits and try to find ways to increase engagement and maximize how long their users spend on their platform by exploiting vulnerabilities in human psychology, Sean Parker, who co-founded Napster and was the first president of Facebook, said the inventors, creators, it's me, it's Mark, it's Kevin Systrom on Instagram, it's all of these people understood this consciously and we did it anyway. Penelope specifically uses the word detox when talking about Billy's 10 days in isolation and spending weekends away from their company, telling us that Billy the creator needs to frequently escape his own company and products. And I think that's the most important takeaway. Like Billy, every president, vice president, COO, CEO of all these platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter know what their company is doing and the effect that it has. Going back to the 2017 interview with Chamath, he mentions how he lives his life now after contributing to these toxic platforms, saying, "Where I have decided to spend my time is to take the capital that they rewarded me with and now focus on the structural changes that I can control." In the beginning of this episode, we start on Chris's closed eye, with him listening to 30 minutes of guided meditation. During this meditation, his eye opens to the sound of a notification, symbolic of an awakening, and both Chris and Billy made mistakes. Chris got distracted by his smartphone while driving, and Billy created a toxic platform that is now out of his control. Due to the accident, Chris had become aware of the harmful and addictive lifestyle that comes with using social media. Chris's plan for contacting Billy was his own unique way of taking responsibility for what he did. Billy Bauer is a representation of every leader in the tech world, and how they need to start taking responsibility for the current state of these platforms and how they are developing. As Charlie Brooker stated, "You've got a responsibility to grow the company and to your shareholders, but you also have an ethical responsibility." And that's the debate that is going on in the tech world at the moment, and will continue to do so. I hope we've got that right. It'll be interesting to see what Jack Dorsey makes of it. After learning about how Smithereen played a big part in killing Chris's fiance, and then seeing the news that Chris died in the car, Billy returns to the silent, isolated room, arriving back to a state of self-reflection by continuing his meditation. And the last shot we see is Billy closing his eyes. The CEO either shrugs off this moment and quickly moves on with his life, falling back into the same cycle without learning anything like everyone else in their world, or he can reflect on what happened and understand how to better focus on the changes that he is capable of making, even if he does feel like his company is out of his control, starting with something as small as giving a mom the password for her deceased daughter's account, so she can finally get closure and end the routine of spending every single day on Persona. If Billy is representing the leaders of the tech world, Smithereen is no doubt representative of every single popular social media app out there. The newspaper in Chris's mom's house says that half the world is on Smithereen, and right now it's estimated that near half the world has access to the internet. There are over 1 billion monthly users on Instagram, 321 million on Twitter, 542 million on Reddit, and 2.38 billion on Facebook, and every other social media app is following in their footsteps trying to increase their engagement. So half the world having access to at least one of these platforms is not too far off. The sniper takes the shot, and after the blast, the meaning behind the hostage situation was turned into smithereens. From the second Chris opens his eyes to the moment Billy closes this is, we are shown how excessively using these popular social media apps like the ones that we have on our phones can be very harmful to our society in a lot of ways. And after realizing that we joined everyone else in checking our smartphones when the credits rolled, we are given a chance to reflect on how social media is negatively affecting our own lives. Whether or not you're a big tech leader or just a user, we're all left with the same choice as Billy: to break the routine or fall back into the same vicious cycle. And that's all I had to say about Smithereens. This was definitely my favorite episode of Season 5, and I think it's a very necessary one for the age we live in. By the way, huge shout out to Andrew Scott for his performance as Chris. Absolutely incredible job. I definitely plan on making an analysis for every episode this season, but I really want to give you guys the most detailed, accurate, and well thought out analysis that I can give you, so it might take some time. But please be patient because this video took me more than a week to make. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next Black Mirror Season 5 Ending Explained.